Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Cosmic Castaway podcast. I'm your host, Steve Gedzik. For the first episode, I thought I'd go with a topic that's pretty hot lately. It's been in the news a lot of chatter on social media, and that is disclosure of the whole UFO subject and extraterrestrial life, and whether it's visiting our planet or not, and if we have alien technology, and if we've recovered crashed UFO, all that. Questions have been asked for a very long time that the general public generally can't seem to get a straight answer to, and hasn't been able to, despite a lot of effort. And so I just thought I'd start with that. And but before I get too much into that, I just wanted to really just briefly touch on a little bit of the history of the UFO subject, because I watch a lot of podcasts, and I listen to a lot of people on in the news, and that when they bring up the subject, they the way that they frame it kind of bugs me, because well, I'll explain that in a moment, but I just wanted to very briefly go over that. I'm not going to go this is going to become like a documentary or a TED talk on the history of UFOs. There are many books, there are many great books out there. I highly recommend books by Stanton Friedman. If you want a good background on the subject, I highly recommend his books. And I just thought I'd just touch on it, just because there's a couple of things I need to get off my chest before I get into disclosure. But my thoughts on disclosure. So as far as the history of the UFO subject, it's starting to feel like. So the history of UFO encounters and sightings goes back a really long way. I mean, a really, really long way. I personally believe it goes back thousands of years, not decades, or even millennia, or centuries. I think it goes back millennia. And this is not a new thing. It's not even. I mean, it's an old subject. I just think that. There was a point in time when human beings reached certain, they crossed certain lines that caused concern for whoever these beings are. But I believe they've always been around us and among us for probably since the beginning, whenever or where that was. I believe they've always been around, and probably have something to do with us being here. But we'll save that for another episode. So again, there's many books that can go into the details, but the UFO subject goes back in cases. They go back a long way. There's even some. It's anecdotal, but like there's even references and pictures and biblical texts that show flying objects with a person in it. Like a flying wheel, or people encountering strange angelic or demonic beings, or flying burning wheels. I mean, at the time, I don't think they realized that who they were talking to, what they were seeing, was possibly something from another world or from another dimension, because they had no frame of reference. They had no concept of science, no concept of engineering, or no foundational understanding of basic science. So they just use whatever frame of reference they had at the time. And so they would just describe things like a flying wheel, or a burning flying wheel, or something like that, or sky chariots, or whatever. But again, you'll see stuff like that mentioned in biblical texts, but that doesn't prove that it was a UFO. But you have to admit it's highly suspicious, because if they weren't talking about that, then what the hell were they talking about? And so anyway, I believe these encounters and sightings have been going on. People have been around it and seeing it a long time. They just, again, it was just like they just didn't think of it as something that was from another planet. They just thought it was. They probably just saw it and thought it was weird and moved on with their lives. And then it wasn't until the 20th century that where we started documenting, where this stuff seemed to start. We began to document this stuff, and I think it wasn't until I know that there are a lot of there are a lot of big influencers out there, big podcasts that like to bring up, and there's lots of people out there who like to bring up Roswell as one of the most famous cases, because it seemed to set off a global interest in the subject, because it was like, oh my gosh, because he had that newspaper article that said, that the Roswell Air Force Base recovered a flying saucer, and it was like, oh my gosh, what? And it was a big deal, and then mysteriously it was suddenly covered up. Just as quickly as it hit the news, it was covered up, and no honest explanation has been given about that incident ever since. And so, and that only made it worse. That only made people more curious, because they wanted answers. They want to know, like, okay, did you or did you not recover one? And they're saying no, but then you have witnesses who were involved saying, yeah, no, we did. So the question, unfortunately, none of these witnesses have physical evidence. They don't have any pieces of wreckage, and they don't have any pictures or anything. They just have a story. And so and some people, they believe it, and some people don't. And but there isn't like a consensus, and there's not even a consensus as to why these craft crashed. Assuming the story is true, which I 100% believe it is. But no one can even agree on how or why it crashed. Anyway, the UFO subject became hot, I think really, really hot in July of 1947, when the Roswell story hit the paper. But again, please remember, these stories go back. There have been cases that go back further than that, much, much further. But the Roswell case really set off a national. It was like a national like beacon for this subject, and got a lot of people interested. And there was also fear that came with that, because there are some people, again, with very limited knowledge of outer space and other planets and other life forms. They're just going off of what other people are saying. They don't actually know any facts. With that ignorance comes, unfortunately, a natural fear that of like other people might come here and eat them. Because science fiction, there are a lot of science fiction books and radio programs about Martians coming to Earth to eat us and kill us and all that, which obviously didn't help anything. I mean, it's science fiction; it's not real. But like, some people, stories have the power to influence people. And so again, people who just are ignorant of the subject, and that it can leave an impression on them and cultivate this fear, which we'll get into that later too. So I know that guys like Joe Rogan, he named, so he's got that new comedy club in Austin, Texas, and he named two of the main theaters, or the stages or whatever, after the two atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. And it's his contention, and he didn't think of this. Other people have been saying this way before him, but he agrees with the notion that the UFO activity ramped up after August of 1945, when we dropped those bombs, because they became concerned about the fact that we were dropping weapons of mass destruction and using them against each other. There is a logic to that. I don't agree that the sightings ramped up after that. I don't necessarily agree that the frequency increased. I think that people just began looking and noticing them more, because of the crash in 47, and that newspaper headline becoming like a major headline that made its way all over the world. I think that just heightened people's senses and attention span to start looking for them and photographing them. But I think before that, people didn't really think anything of it. They just thought it was some weird thing in the sky. And again, they would just go back to their business. They didn't, they didn't really understand that what they were looking at was something, they couldn't conceive that was something from another world. Because science fiction was, was not, that kind of science fiction didn't really exist back then. So anyway, once the Roswell incident happened, it brought national awareness, and suddenly people started noticing more, rather than just, again, instead of it being like background noise, they just really started to notice. And actually, not only noticed, they started talking about it. They started reporting it to the police and whoever would listen. So, but anyway, I get the logic of that, and it does make a certain sense. I do believe that there was definitely a concern. I believe that whoever they are definitely concerned about the fact that we developed atomic energy and have perverted it into weapons of mass destruction and have enhanced those weapons of mass destruction significantly. From the kilotons to the megatons that we have today, and we have many of them. We have more than enough nuclear firepower to kill everybody on Earth, in a very short period of time. And then make the planet a radioactive wasteland and uninhabitable, for thousands of years. So, yes, I'm sure they're concerned about that. But again, I don't agree that the frequency increased. I think people noticed more. People started noticing and talking about it more because of the Roswell incident. So anyway, so there's, and since then, there have been many major cases, big cases. And the reason I'm mentioning this because people often are, today, people seem to be stuck and only ever talk about, they seem to be hyper-focused on this Tic Tac UFO incident. Like one other, and that one that was on the mainstream media back in 2017, which we'll get to in a second. The one that showed that object moving really erratically, but there was no like heat coming out of it. There was no exhaust. It was just moving. Anyway, there have been a lot of major incidents. There have been a lot of just tons of highly credible witnesses and all kinds of excellent evidence and investigations, but it's like no one ever talks about it. Like no one ever. You almost never hear about it. All you hear is about that David Fravor guy and the other guy, I'm blanking on his name, and the other guy. It's like that's all you ever hear about now. Like that one incident, like the Tic Tac UFO, which I personally believe that's one of ours. I am certain that's one of our man-made craft that's based on UFO technology that we reverse engineered from a downed craft. That's just my belief. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying that's my personal belief. It just seems weird that you had people like you had NASA, you had former cosmonauts, former astronauts, like Gemini astronauts. You have career pilots who are in both military and commercial, who flew like their entire life, like 40 plus years of their life, with highly credible witnesses, military, ex DOD, Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force. You've got people from all walks of life, highly credible people with really, really, really fascinating encounters and fascinating accounts. But you almost never hear anyone mention any of it. It's almost like it didn't happen. It's almost like the UFO phenomenon just started in 2017, and then it's like from the public's point of view, like that's when it started. But before that, it just wasn't happening. It's so weird. Anyway, that just bugs me very much. I just want to get that out there because it just really annoys me that that you never hear people go back and reference witnesses that, again, are far more credible. Not that they're not credible, but they're far more credible and than these two and their case. Far more credible, and are far more compelling. But anyway, I digress. And also, there have been groups that have been studying the subject. You know, like all you ever hear about is, I guess, called ATIP or ARROW or whatever. They're like, oh, these are these secret government projects that have been, you know, secretly studying. I mean, come on. There have been a whole bunch of private groups that have been studying this subject, and private individual investigators have been studying this for almost 100 years ago. I mean, you had NICAP, which started in 1956. You had MUFON, that started in 1969. You had QFOS, that started in 1973. Project Blue Book, which was a BS study, which was completely military controlled, and it was just it was government funded, and it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, see, we're taking this seriously. Don't worry about it. You know, we'll get some out of it, just to appease the public and make it look like they're taking it seriously. But they ultimately, in that ran from 1952 to 1969, and at the end of it, their conclusion was, yeah, we didn't find anything credible. So, and which is strange. And by the way, I actually have a copy of the actual Project Blue Book document. It's interesting because even in their own Project Blue Book final results page, the guy who publicly, when they got up, there was I think an Air Force guy, I'm blanking on his name, who got up to do a press conference, and he talked about how, well, no, we didn't find anything conclusive, we didn't find anything interesting, blah, blah, blah. But their own report says the opposite. It says, of all the cases, I think it was something like 21%. You know, they had different categories, like not enough information. This percentage of them could have been this. Percentage of them could have been that. This percent, there just wasn't enough information, or the witnesses weren't credible, or there was a lack of information to be able to say either way. But then there was like something like, I'm going to say like, I think somewhere between 15 and 20%, somewhere in that range, where they couldn't. There wasn't enough evidence to prove that it was conventional. Meaning, whatever the issue, whatever the explanation was, it was definitely not conventional. They ruled out all conventional possible explanations, and so all that was left was that it must have been something unconventional, must have been something unusual. But they completely misrepresented that on purpose, in my opinion. They misrepresented it, and just try to they did their best to persuade everyone that there was nothing to it and there was nothing to be worried about, and just to go about your business and forget about it. And they did it, and it worked, because there were very few people followed up on it. But anyway, there's also been like SETI, which was founded in 1984, and then later in the 90s there was Dr. Greer and his Disclosure Project, private people like Stanton Freeman and Nick Pope and many others, Linda Moulton Howard. I apologize if I messed up that name. Again, all private investigators, and they've been at it for a long time. But again, like you never hear these names come up. You never hear these organizations come up. You don't hear about any of this. All you hear is Tic Tac and Fravor. That's all you ever hear, and I think it's really weird. And sometimes you hear but they even brought back Bob Lazar, and that Bob Lazar story goes back to the late 80s, early 90s. And he wants nothing to do with any of this, but they occasionally, they drag him out and they get him to do a documentary. They even got him to do a congressional hearing. But, point is more often than not, you just hear about these very few recent cases, which are all 99.9% likely human devices, man-made devices that are made to look like, that are made to look and behave like something out of this world, but in fact and give people that impression. But in fact, they are very, very, very earthly. They're based on technology from out of this world, but they are made right here. Probably by Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, or one of these other major contractors, defense contractors. So yeah, and all these individuals in these groups, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have podcasts, and reaching people was very difficult, especially considering the just talking about the subject was very hard in like polite circles. It was very hard to talk about these subjects because it was, they were, in my opinion, they were very, very intense psyops, psychological operations going to ridicule the subject, because they knew the people who were trying to discredit this whole phenomenon were working very hard at it. They knew that there was no way for them to stop these things from appearing and disappearing. Like they had no control over any of it. They couldn't tell them to stop, appearing and to stop buzzing around in our skies and interacting with people on Earth, and landing and whatnot. They did the only thing they could do, which was create this false narrative that anyone who talks about the subject is a Looney Tune, is a kook. You're an unserious, uncredible person if you think you saw a UFO, and everyone should laugh at you and ostracize you if you do. People could lose their jobs, people could lose friends and family for bringing it up, because it was so. Again, they made a concerted effort to not only ridicule anyone who tried to talk about this, but also to prevent anyone highly credible from talking about it publicly. Even though some people were able to use their power and connections and maybe even money to be able to reach those media, be able to use those, have access to those mediums, but like I said, the power of ridicule is very strong, especially when it's coming from official sources, like the government. Because back in those days, you have to remember, back in those days, people trusted the government. They, up until a certain point, it wasn't even that long ago. It was the past couple of decades, but people strongly trusted the government up until a few decades ago. So, back in the 50s and the 60s, it's like, no, government never lies. They're looking out for us. They have our best interests in mind. So if they say there's nothing to this UFO stuff, then there's nothing to it. And that worked really well. But again, these private investigators, they would write books. They would interview any witnesses that were brave enough and confident enough to tell their story. And then they would have to kind of determine on their own whether the witness whether they were actually crazy, or if what they were saying was actually true, which is a very difficult thing to do. They would, and if they happened to get any evidence, if they were lucky enough to get their hands on any kind of evidence, whether it be impressions on the ground, or whether it be a photo, or a video, or anything, radiation readings, audio, anything they could get their hand on, radar, tapes from people who are like pilots, like commercial airline pilots. There have been a couple of people who actually had got their hands on copies of radar recordings and have shown them to people, and you could see an object going from one side to the other in a split second. But anyway, they were, they had to do all this the hard way. They had to actually go out there and do the hard work of investigating, and they had to, they didn't have corporate budgets. They had to use their own money, to spend their own money. They were basically glorified volunteers, and they operated on, again, MUFON and all them. It was a volunteer effort. There was no official funding, at least not for a long time. They began to receive funding at some point, but overall, but the way when it started, it was again, it was just all volunteer driven and donation driven, and they just had to go off on their own time when they could, and do these investigations, and then they would publish their findings in books, and they would sell books, and they would make money from the books, and they would use that money to continue investigating. Because they got to travel, and they have to, have to pay mortgages, and they have to live too. So, it was a lot harder back then. You don't really see that much now. You don't really see people doing that now. It's really just because everybody's got phones in their pocket now, and so they can just record stuff and put it on the internet, and all you gotta do is just look on the internet and see where people are posting. But in my opinion, that's a terrible way to look into the subject. That's a really, really awful way. Anyway, on top of all that, the public mediums back then were just TV, radio, and print. That's all there were. Magazines, newspapers, journals, radio broadcasts, and television. And all of them, any station, any media company, so the NBC, ABC, CNN, New York Times, any radio station, any print media, any TV station of any consequence that was popular at all, was, in my opinion, I believe, they were all completely compromised and controlled by, the content was all compromised and controlled, very tightly controlled by the intelligence community. I believe that all of them had operatives in or around those companies, those stations, and they'd be looking for stories that touched on certain subjects. And if they saw certain subjects come up, they would be in a position to say, no, you're not going to run that. If you have a problem with that, then you can leave. They would just, they would intimidate journalists. They would threaten to fire them and to take away their livelihood, whatever. And so a lot of stories would not, a lot of this stuff would get run. Like there'd be people, I have no doubt that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of journalists and a lot of news anchors and radio hosts. I'm certain that there were a lot of people who wanted to run stories and new TV programs about this stuff, but ultimately were told no. Like when the moment came, they got everything set up and they were like, oh yeah, they got the invites out and they were going to have, the guest, the time slot was set up and they had everything ready to go. And then someone made a call and then said, nope, kill it. Kill that story. You can't talk about that. I believe that happened all the time. And then for the unusual times when these stories did come out, when they sometimes did, you'll notice that more often than not, they had a silly spin to them. They had a very condescending spin to them. They would, I remember back in the, I remember in the 90s, whenever something like that would come up on like a local TV station, they would always show like a little graphic, up next to them. They show a little graphic of a little flying saucer, of a cartoonish looking flying saucer, and they would cue the X-Files theme music every single time.
Stars in the night sky the last couple of days. Mysterious red lights are hovering over the skies in the East Valley. A lot of people called us on it. Diane Wright has a story.
It is a case for the X-Files. Strange lights in the skies over the East Valley, caught on camera by Ernie Summers.
And the goal is that's supposed to make you think this is not. It's supposed to put the impression on you that this is not a serious subject. That this is a hokey, sci-fi, crackpot, delusional, whatever story. And the people talking about it are probably all crackpots.
I'm joined by Bill Eaton here, who helped sponsor this. Is there some fear that you trivialize it in some way by goofing around with it, though? Because some people take this very seriously.
No, well, some people take it very seriously, but I think It's all a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, isn't it? I mean, don't you think so?
I think there are lots of tongues and lots of cheeks here at the moment. That is the latest from here. Just wanted to give you a little flavor of Roswell, New Mexico this evening as the aliens are back in town. Back to you.
Thanks,
All right, Jeff, you never know who you're going to meet out
They're
there.
selling lots of aluminum foil out there. And that wraps up this edition of Prime News. Thanks, man.
Easy for the U.S. government to keep a secret, much less sustain a massive half-century-long cover-up of what it is alleged to know about UFOs. Nevertheless, conspiracy theories abound, often combining mistrust of government, ignorance of facts, and a lot of wishful thinking about visitors from outer space.
You know, that's how they would set the tone. You know, with that kind of audio and visuals. You know, so that way, again, you're automatically turned off because you're just like, oh, this is one of those crackpot stories, and it worked, and it worked really well. Very few people actually did serious journalism, like George Knapp is one. He is an excellent journalist, and he would invite on guests like he was the guy who brought in and did that interview with Bob Lazar, that famous one with Bob Lazar. Art Bell has talked to him multiple times on his show. Art Bell is a very open-minded person, and he was really big into this stuff. So he talked to him a bunch of times. He also brought in guys like John Lear, who were, again, very into this subject. He's a career pilot all his life, and he had a very strong interest in the subject. But anyway, outside of the rare brave journalists that would cover it, knowing that it was that third rail that you get zapped, and can ruin your career. It can really damage your career and credibility to talk about the stuff. They would do it anyway because they really want to talk about it, and I commend them. But for the most part, nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to touch it. And if they did, they would give it this really silly, condescending spin, again, just so that way you wouldn't take it seriously. And you would just sort of laugh it off, and you would roll your eyes and wait, and then just move on. But now, now fast forward to 2017, and suddenly you have CNN covering it's like a headlining story.
The U.S. Navy has finally acknowledged that videos appearing to show UFOs flying through the air are real. They don't call them UFOs, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena. The several videos they're talking about were recorded years ago by fighter pilots. Then in 2017, they were made public by the New York Times. More now from our Randy Kay.
It's rotating.
Images of that rotating thing captured by U.S. Navy aircraft, sensors locking in on the target. Commander David Fravor saw it firsthand during a training mission, describing it like a 40-foot-long tic-tac, maneuvering rapidly and changing direction.
And as we both looked out the right side of our airplane, we saw a disturbance in the water and a white object, oblong, pointing north.
The object was first sighted in 2004, then similar objects again in 2015. Footage of the sightings, declassified by the military, weren't made public until December 2017 by the New York Times and a group that researches UFOs.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My God. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Oh, okay, dude.
This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. The ability to hover over the water and then start a vertical climb from basically zero up towards about 12,000 feet and then accelerate in less than 2 seconds and disappear is something I had never seen in my life.
I mean, just like that. I mean, yesterday they're laughing at. You had Bill Nye making fun of. You had like CNN with Larry King, and you had like the three highly credible witnesses. Two military guys, and actually three military guys, Air Force, and then I can't remember what the other two were, but three military guys being interviewed by Larry King, and then they bring in Bill Nye, Bill Nye, who doesn't know anything about this subject, and he just immediately opens up with just like libel. He just starts making stuff up about, oh yeah, I heard that there was they were basically telling a story about how this famous case about a UFO appearing outside the gate of a nuclear armed Minuteman missile silo site up in I think it was North Dakota or Montana or something like that, and it shut down all the nukes at the site. And Bill Nye, again, who knows nothing about the subject, he doesn't know anything about military operations either. He opens up with like, "Oh, I heard there was drinking." I mean, he went right to that, and he had absolutely no evidence of it. I mean, there was zero. You can't. First of all, you can't drink on a military control on a nuclear armed site. I mean, what, are you out of your mind? I mean, he just went right into lying. He went right to the lies. He went right. I have no doubt he was coached by a CIA operative or someone from the from the intelligence community. I have no idea he was coached, and he was fed a script and just given a bunch of like one-liners to just throw out there. And they were probably told him like right out of the gate, just set that tone right out of the gate. Just, oh, there was drinking involved. Just so that way anyone listening will go, oh, well, okay, they were probably drunk. So I don't need to hear the rest of this. It's probably just alcohol that just explains all this. I mean, it was such a dirty, and I lost all respect for that guy. When I saw that, I lost all respect for him. The guy who was supposed to be Mr. Science, doing the opposite of science, telling lies about something he knows nothing about, and pretending like he does. But anyway, so like, 5 minutes ago, you had CNN bringing in Bill Nye to ridicule the subject, and all of a sudden, in the next breath, it's, oh my God, it's headline news, and there's this object was tracked, and we got this infrared gun cam footage of this object moving at incredible speeds and making impossible maneuvers, and creating no exhaust trail and this and that, and we don't know we don't know what it is or where it came from and this and that, and we should all be afraid, and we should all be scared, shaking in our boots. We should be, we should all be like afraid, and we need to like do something about this immediately. I mean, just like that. I mean, how does not anyone think that's suspicious? How could you not be suspicious when you have a media conglomerate that made it a point to ridicule and destroy the careers and the lives of anyone who openly talked about this? Anyone. You could be the most prestigious scientist, a college professor. You could be, again, a 40-year career. It doesn't matter. They will find something on you and then just use that to explain away, or they'll just make something up like Bill Nye. They'll just make shit up. It's just say anything just to shut down the conversation, right as fast as possible. How do you go from that to suddenly being like, oh my God, these things are real, and we need to do something about it right now. We need to spend a bunch of taxpayer money on it. And then you had and they're inviting on guests like Luis Alessandro. I apologize if I mispronounced the name. I'm notoriously horrible with names, so I apologize. And this guy's a former counter. They're bringing on a guy who is a former counterintelligence. He's a former counterintelligence agent. Counterintelligence is someone who basically lies for a living. You hide a lie between truths, and then you feed that to an enemy to cause confusion. That's literally what counterintelligence is. And he literally was a counterintelligence agent. And then you have this guy being invited on the CNN saying, oh yeah, there was this ATIP program that no one knew about, and they've been looking into this subject secretly. It's like, so let me get this straight. You didn't care. The day before you didn't care. Now suddenly you care. And you're bringing in people, who used to lie for a living to be the face of this, to be the spokesperson who's going to take the lead on this. No, I don't think so. And again, it's very bizarre that more people don't question that they just go along with it. and they think, yeah, I'm sure he's a nice guy. Again, I'm not saying he's this evil person. I'm sure he's a decent guy, but he's not credible. He's just not credible because he worked a job where he lied as a profession. He knowingly and purposely spread misinformation and disinformation, again, to deceive and to confuse people. So how do we know he's not doing that now? How do we know that? And he claims, "Oh, I don't work for the government anymore," and this and that. It doesn't matter. How do we know that? And we don't know that for sure. That could be a lie. And B, even if it is, it doesn't mean that you're not still working for them. You may not be working for them officially, but you could still be doing something for them off the books. Either way, not a credible person, not trustworthy. I don't know why anyone takes him seriously, but he's spouting the same thing. He's taking the same approach and the same tone as again all the other major outlets, which is a threat to our airspace, a threat. They're using the word threat all the time, which is ridiculous. Because if these things were actually from outer space and they were a threat to us, we'd all be dead already. And with that level of technology, if they actually wanted to do harm to us, we'd all be gone. We'd all been gone a long time ago. The Earth would just be a cloud of dust, glowing not radioactive, but a cloud of dust. Or just the planet would just be stripped of all humans already. They would have. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't buy it. And it's obviously the same people who are behind, covering up this subject and keeping the information about ETs and the technology fanatically locked down. Fanatically, I mean, they stop at nothing to prevent any of it from getting exposed. I mean, it exceeds the cost of human life. They will kill. It doesn't matter. They'll buy you out. They'll kill you. Whatever it takes. You just can't get it out there. Anyway, so they this suddenly becomes a thing, and then you have people. Now it's out there, but again, it's concerning to me that it's being given a spin of they're evil and you should be afraid, and this could become something much worse. I think that's all. I think that's more disinformation, misinformation. I think that I think, and maybe it'll be this year. Maybe we're about to, in about 5 minutes, it's going to be 2025. Maybe this year, maybe there'll be some major incident. I don't know. All I know is that this continues to seem to be building up to something, because the fact that it's just suddenly being taken seriously by mainstream media all of a sudden out of nowhere, and then on top of that, shortly after that 2017, I almost forgot to mention this. Shortly after that 2017 news story broke, all of a sudden, it's like, well, we need Space Force now. We need a military presence in space, which I thought last time I checked, that was illegal. Putting weapons in space was illegal. There was a treaty signed back during the Cold War that said no one will put any kind of weapons platforms in orbit or on the moon. So I'm not sure how they're going to get around that. But all of a sudden, this radical story comes out by people who have made it a point to destroy and ruin anyone who ever talked about it. Suddenly now they want to talk about it out of nowhere, and then right after that, in the next hop, we're spending taxpayer money to deploy military into space to defend us from threats from outer space, which is, again, that's how this is like a B-list science fiction novel. It's so it's so predictable. It's kind of sad. And I don't know why more people don't see the pattern here. And I suspect because a lot of people just don't know the history. Like people like me who've been paying close attention to this for a very long time and watched the patterns. And yeah, so I mean, you've got this narrative in one hand of strange objects that are moving in impossible ways being filmed by military, and they and they're, oh my god, what is, you can hear them on the audio, oh my god, what the f is that? And look at that thing move and all that, and they're claiming they don't know what it is, and they don't know how they're moving, and they can't explain any of it. And on the other hand, you have the formation of a new branch of military that's going to be stationed in outer space, putting weapons up there to fight against. To me, this looks like, again, all looks like it looks like someone moving their chess pieces into place. If this were like a game of chess, it's someone going for the checkmate. They're positioning themselves. They're going for that final strike, position themselves for that checkmate. They want to take that queen. They want to take that king and queen. They want to. They're trying to get ahead of the narrative. They want to own the narrative and make sure that everyone, at least anyone of consequence, the majority of the population believes that what they say, which is that these things are a threat, and that you should be afraid of them. Regardless of where they're coming from, you need to be afraid of them, and you need to let us expand. You need to give us, the military, more money to expand the military further into space, or further out there, or expand the military further and start putting weapons in orbit, 100 miles, 200 miles, 250 miles above your head, just floating above your head, and then probably out there on the moon as well. And then once that's all in place, once those pieces are all in place, if they have control over the narrative and those pieces are in place, the final step is just to, basically stage an incident that appears to look like some kind of out of this world, an attack from someone or something outside of this world. That's the final piece here. But you got to have all the other pieces in place. And to me, that's where that looks like this is going. I think this is going to be like, again, the same people who are behind all of this in fanatical secrecy are suddenly, I don't know, maybe this was their plan all along, or maybe they're accelerating their plans for some reason. I don't know. All I know is that clearly there was a sudden shift where, again, all the pieces are being put into place. All the chess, the chess pieces are being positioned for the final strike. And I'm afraid it'll succeed. I'm afraid that the public, just like they did in 9/11, and just like they did in, for Vietnam War and World War II, the public will buy it. They'll believe that, this attack, that will be completely false flag. It'll be completely staged, but it will be so convincing that the average person will totally believe it. I believe that they have the capability to just push a button, and suddenly you'll see like what look like alien ships attacking people, and you'll believe it. You'll believe it 100%. That this is real, and you won't question it. You'll just be afraid for your life. You'll be so scared that anyone who steps up to defend you, you'll say, yes, here, I'll give up anything. I'll give up my rights. I'll give up my freedom of speech. Look what happened during COVID. I don't want to bring COVID too much into this, but I don't want to go into that at all. But like the key thing about COVID was this. What did people say? Look, you had people, you had celebrities, and you had, celebrity personalities coming out and saying, and you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, for God's sake, saying, F your freedoms. And you had Howard Stern saying, F your freedoms. I mean, basically what they're telling you is just give in to fear and just give up all your freedoms for the sake of security. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's exactly what these I mean, the kinds of people who are behind all the secrecy, that is exactly what they engineer. They engineered, that's always their goal, and that's exactly what they do. They engineer situations where the end result is people become so afraid that they give up more and more of their freedoms until none of them's left. And once they're gone, by the way, once you give them up, you never get them back. Never ever get them back. It takes nothing less than an act of God to get them back. And so I think that what's building up here again is some kind of situation where there's going to be, again, like a staged attack. That's people are going to believe lock, stock, and barrel. The majority of people will buy into that it's an attack from out of this, from someone from somewhere else, and we need to arm up, and we need to, it's like straight out of Independence Day. We just need to go out there and kick alien butt, and then the world will unite around this common threat in sort of a military, and we'll go out into the cosmos, not in peace. We'll go out into the cosmos as a warlike race, just attacking, shooting at anything that's not human, and that's a sad future. If I ever heard one, that's a really sad and dark future. If I ever heard one, and it's looking like that's probably the way this is going to play out. More and more as time goes on, I'm seeing the piece again. I hate to keep saying this, but I'm seeing the pieces fall into place, and I'm just waiting for that final move. I'm waiting for the checkmate move. I'm just waiting for it. And and all I'm seeing right now are things like as all I'm seeing at the moment are in terms of like public interest, our public pressure on trying to get answers to this are like these congressional hearings, for example. And I applaud the members of Congress and whoever else is involved in putting those together. I applaud like bringing this awareness to the public. I think it's great. I'm happy about that in spirit, but these hearings will accomplish nothing. Bringing these same witnesses in there will accomplish absolutely nothing. I mean, there have been witnesses, again, that are beyond, in terms of credibility and knowledge, beyond, Fravor and the other guy, and even Bob Lazar, that are beyond them, and many of them, but you never hear any, and they weren't taken seriously either. They were all brought out. Dr. Greer had his 2000. He's had multiple events where he's brought a whole bunch of witnesses, all in at once. Where he goes to, he brings them all to Washington, and he has a big public presentation, and they all tell their story, and they all, in the end, it doesn't move the needle. I mean, I'm glad they're doing it. But my point is if no one takes that seriously, why should they take this Fravor guy seriously? And why should they take these congressional hearings seriously? And it's just, it won't accomplish anything. Bottom line is, it won't accomplish anything. The people who are behind this, people who are controlling this, people who are fanatically committed to preventing any of this stuff from getting out of their hands, getting out of their control, are not just going to be like, oh, well, gee, those people in Congress, they really wanted some answers. So they wrote us a really strong worded letter. So I guess we better just, tell them what we know. They're not threatened by anybody. I mean, think about it. Look at it from their point of view. They have technology that you only see in the movies. They have stuff you see in Star Trek and Star Wars. They actually have that stuff. And they have their own funding. They don't need your money. They don't need your tax money. They have their own funding, and they follow their own rules. They don't comply. The Constitution doesn't mean anything to them. Law and order means nothing to them. They do what they want. And it's the technology that gives them, that is the only reason why they get away with it. I mean, think of how it would be like trying to. It'd be like a like a Native American trying, back in the day, Native Americans back, pre-colonization, trying to fight like a modern day United States Marine. I mean, how are you gonna fight a Marine with a bow and arrow when he's got a sniper that can take you out, a mile away? Yeah, snipers that can shoot almost a mile away. I mean, they have no reason to be afraid, and they have no reason to tell you anything or to comply in any way. They're guarding, as I think Morpheus said it best from the Matrix. They're guarding all the doors. They're holding all the keys. Sooner or later, someone will have to confront them. But for now, they're guarding all the doors and they're holding all the keys. And that's that. You can't fight these people. You can't make them do anything. They have, from their point of view, they have no reason to. They have no incentive to do so. And second, no one can intimidate them. No one can. No one. They they have technology that you see in Star Trek and you see in Star Wars. They can appear and disappear. They can, they can do stuff that appears like magic to the rest of us. I mean, anyway, and plus, most people also, in addition to that, most people in government, they don't even know anything. They don't, Trump doesn't know anything. Obama didn't know anything. Clinton, no. I believe personally that no president since Eisenhower has been told anything. I think if they've been told anything, they've been fed disinformation, so that way they would tell the public the same thing, and they would go along, like they would tell them that these aliens are evil and they're going to come kill us and we have to do something about it. It's something to be feared, and and so they would poison their mind with that. So they would poison and infect others with it, including the public, and other, other powerful people. But they were not allowed. They didn't have a need to know to be able to learn anything about any of this, and those who tried to get at some of it were only warned once: stay away from this or else. And then that's it. And then they just dropped it. I believe personally, Eisenhower was the last president who actually knew what was really, had any information at all about what was really going on. And I think he was actually bullied out of it. At that point, the military-industrial complex, specifically rogue aspects of it, rogue groups within the military-industrial complex, went rogue, for lack of a better word, and he got muscled out of it. He wasn't allowed access. He wasn't allowed to know anything. And I believe that's why at the end of his term, when he made that famous speech and he made that famous statement that says, "Beware the military-industrial complex," his exact words. And I believe what he was really referring to was the fact that these people had very dangerous and very powerful, dangerous technology, and they were not going to share it with the public. They were going to develop it and do God knows what with it, but they had no intention of ever sharing with the public. And it was his way of saying, just so you know, I'm on my way out, but as I need you all, as my last order of business, I need you all to know that these people are a real threat to you, and they're gonna, going into the future, they're gonna be able to, they can and they will do all kinds of terrible things with this technology, and someone needs to do something about it at some point. And here we are, here we are today, and lots of terrible things have happened, and this technology is still completely secretive. I think some of it's been siphoned out through private companies, but again, that's another topic for another day. but the energy, the big stuff, the energy and propulsion stuff, nothing. Tightly controlled. So yeah, basically, yeah. What you have is a situation where you have these rogue groups that are breaking the law. They're running illegal ops involving this technology. Um, they're 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 um, they're committing acts of treason. They're they're lying to the president of the United States. They're lying to our elected leaders. They're denying access to people to this stuff that are allowed to see it, but they're saying no, you can't because you don't. We decided you don't have a need to know, and we don't think you're going to go along with our agenda. So you're not in the club, so to speak. You won't be allowed to know. And anyone who gets close to this, anyone who learns something that is in any way damaging to the credibility of the military or these rogue groups, again, is many of them have been threatened. Many of them have been told that you talk about this and you're dead, or we're going to take your pension away. We're going to take away your license. We're going to tell people that you're a pedophile, whatever. They just threaten these people. Anyone who actually has like damaging information is threatened into silence. I think I have no idea that there's still a lot. I have no doubt in my mind that there's still a lot of people out there who know a lot about this, who have very compelling, credible stories to tell, but they just won't because they're scared to death of what's going to happen to them or their family. And that's why a lot of them end up giving those deathbed confessions. Maybe not a lot of them, but many of them end up telling a story on their deathbed. That's a thing you see more and more now. Deathbed confessions. You have people who they know they're about to die, and they just they either pre-record it and say, after I'm dead, go ahead and release this, but don't release until after I'm dead, or they confess months before they die, and they don't wait until they're dead. They just say, well, let's just do this interview now because I'm going to be dead in a month. But either way, you have a situation where you have this group of rogue people who, again, have their own funding. They have technology that's been stolen from, I believe, that's been stolen from downed ET craft that we've somehow have shot down. Somehow we built or gained access to some kind of weapon system that allows us to shoot them down, and have since enhanced to such a degree that I think that's why we don't see. I think that's one of the two reasons why we don't see sightings the way we used to anymore. Because I think people used to see them all the time. I just think now we don't, because everyone has cameras and they don't want to be filmed, and they know we have cameras everywhere, so they just they don't want to be filmed and they don't want people to know. And second, I think because we have a weapons platform that's global that can instantly target and fire upon any of these objects and shoot them down. I think they know that also, and so they just don't get close anymore. I think that 99% of the time when people see stuff now, it's ours and not theirs. I think it's almost always ours. I think it's very rare at this point that anything we see now is theirs, because again, they know that we have weapons platforms that can shoot them down almost immediately. And they're the ones who are guarding all this. They have military guys guarding this information who are prepared to use lethal force against anyone, even President of the United States, even the director of the CIA. They will use lethal force. I mean, they have given very strict orders. If this person looks into this any further, if this person talks about this, if this person tries to defect and go rogue, take them out. People on the inside and people on the outside. I mean, they're both stuck, behind this. Again, these complete psychopaths who are guarding this stuff with absolute fanaticism, and they use. There's no limit to the level of violence they will use to keep it secret. And so that brings me to disclosure. The kind of the main topic of this video, which is disclosure. In my opinion, I think disclosure can happen in one of two ways. Either they win, and there's either one future, which is they win and then they being the people who have been the same people who have been guarding this technology and information for a long time. They win control of the narrative. They launch a false flag attack. We all buy it, or enough people buy it, and we go into a future with endless war. And except this time it'll be interplanetary and interstellar war. We'll become this race of people. We'll become this species in the universe that just goes around killing any other aliens that show up at our door. Like that becomes our mantra. Just, they're all a threat, so we need to kill them all. We need to go out there and not only do we need to kill them all when they show up, we should go out there and find out where they live and go, burn down their house. Like that will be who we become. Because again, these people will create a false flag incident that will be so convincing. The average person will 1000% buy it lock, stock, and barrel. They won't question it. And they'll be so scared that they'll just give up all of their right. They'll give up all of their freedoms. They'll give up all of their personal freedoms and give up the Constitution, all of it, in the name of safety and security. And then again, we'll become just this one world sort of military. Just like there'll be like a military takeover of humanity, and it will just be again this warlike species that goes around killing everybody in the universe. And obviously, whoever they are out there, they're not going to stand for that, especially considering I believe that we are almost at parity technology-wise. I believe we've almost reached parity with them. Our technology is almost as good as theirs, if not already. Maybe we already have. I don't know, but we are reaching a point where if our technology gets too good, and we've figure out a way to start sending, we figure out a way to start building the means to not only, we already have the means to kill them and to harm them, when they're here. If we have the means to launch attacks, to go to where they live, to go to their planets and attack them on their own turf, I don't believe they'll put up with that. I believe that will force a decision on their end I think it's very possible that they will be forced to terminate all of us. All of us will be wiped out. Every human on the planet Earth will be wiped out. Because they obviously can't let us, if it comes down to like it's either us or them, they're going to obviously choose to preserve their own race, which is, obviously their right, And so I think they will terminate us before we get a chance to terminate them. And so there's obviously a lot at stake here. And I don't think most people really are looking at it in that big, in that scope. I think they're just thinking just stuff that's because you're kind of you're still focused on this, like these, the drones and all that. But it's like, look at where this is going. Forget about what's happening right now. Think about if this pattern continues into the future. Look at where this goes. What is the end result of all this? And that's, again, like I said, a global military takeover where we just go out into space and we kill anyone and everything that is different, that's non-human. And we do it under the justification of that, well, see, they remember when, because it'd all be under the guise of a false flag attack, just like the Vietnam War, just like Vietnam War, just like 9/11 and the weapons of mass destruction, the Desert Storm. They were all of these things, all of these wars were all started under false pretenses. They're all based on lies, and they use lies to justify our, launching incursions and going out and killing people, because it was like, well, it's either us or them. No, that was never true, but the public bought it every time. Well, most of the public bought it every time, and they decided, and our leaders went along with it every time. And this will play out the same way in principle, but it will be instead of it just being one country versus another country, humans against humans, it will be someone else out there. Well, it will be made to look like someone else out there. It will be interplanetary. It'll be interstellar. The enemies will be made to look like they're alien creatures, like they're, with advanced technology, but it'll really be us staging that. So that way we buy it, we get scared, and we say, please protect us. Here's my freedoms. Here's the Constitution. Take it. Do whatever you want. Just protect me. Just keep us safe. And that is ultimately the end goal there. That's ultimately the end goal. That's one of the goals anyway. It's one of the goals. And if that is allowed to happen, if that actually does happen, if they get control of the narrative and that is allowed to happen, your children and your children's children and their children will never know freedom. They'll never know peace. They'll never know what it's like to be able to walk free as a human being, to walk about. It'll just be endless war for centuries. It'll be endless war, assuming we aren't wiped out. Assuming whoever's actually out there doesn't step in and say, I'm sorry, but you guys, we can't allow you guys to go around killing people. We're going to have to, sort of like a house that's been infested with termites. Eventually the damage becomes so extensive, you just have to bulldoze the house, destroy it, and start over. Well, they may be forced to make a decision similar to that. They may say, you know what, we can't allow this. This has gone on too far. We can't allow you to go any further. We've tried to reason with you. We tried to be peaceful, but you guys are out of control, and now you pose a threat to our homeworld, and we can't allow you to come to us and harm us. So, and then they would just wipe us all out. So they would have no choice but to wipe us out, in order to preserve themselves. So, that's, again, I think those are very, very, I think those are a good chance that some scenario like that could play out. Otherwise, as far as like an alternative, as far as like getting, as far as like preventing that from happening, they're really, I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer. I hate to sound like a naysayer, but like a pessimist. But I personally, again, congressional hearings, and no amount of congressional hearings or strongly worded letters or documentaries or nothing. None of that will ever. No executive orders. Nothing will ever. You will never pry anything from these people. You will never get them to do anything. Like I said before, they have no incentive. If you look at it from their point of view, they have no incentive. They will not budge. The only way I see this going a different way, which is we don't plunge into this dystopian future of endless interplanetary war. The only way I can see this happening is brave people on the inside. Brave people on the inside who are willing to put it all on the line. They defect. And they encourage many others to do so. And it's our job to protect them, to get them out, in the public, to tell their stories. And on top of that, not only defect and tell the public what they know, but to also encourage others on the inside to not only come out and defect as well, but also to stand down, to tell the security enforcement officers, the military guys who have all the guns and are ready to shoot to kill anyone who tries to breach their facilities or whatever. I believe they will to encourage them to stand down. That when we bring in, we would have to form our own like national like enforcement agency or something. We had to put together some kind of a group of people who are, again, like law enforcement in nature, and they would go and seize these places, and they would from there they would assume ownership and then bring all these people to all the people who've been hiding it, and all the people, then bring them all to justice. Bring them all to justice and let the justice system work its course. And then in the meantime, as far as the technology, begin to not only disclose all of the secrets that they've been about a lot of things that they've been hiding, but which again would go a long way in terms of public trust, but also to disclose some of these, not all of it, but starting with the energy-based technologies, we could start to release energy-based technologies first, so that we can start to actually heal the planet. We can stop using these, we can stop fighting over the, oil and gas, and we can get away from dirty energy and start moving towards not only clean energy, but not solar and wind, but exotic new types of energy. That's beyond anything we have now, and it's 100% clean, and it's basically infinite. Like, it's just, there are energy sources that are inexhaustible. That will never run out. And you hear terms like zero point energy or quantum vacuum energy. Again, you can do your own research on all that, but we could get that stuff out and start to really make a significant difference for human beings, for everyone, not just a select group, but for everyone. We can start actually significantly reshaping the planet for everyone, and really, and I mean, like, in a really positive way and very quickly, which would may have a major impact on poverty and again the energy crisis and just it would transform our human society. Just a few of these energy technologies alone would transform human society drastically. The propulsion stuff, I agree, shouldn't come out right away. That should be kept. It shouldn't. I'm not saying we should keep it secretive, but we should definitely keep it under. We should keep it tightly. Like nuclear. The way nuclear weapons are kept. Like, you can't look up how to build a nuclear weapon on the internet. Like, you can't go out and acquire it. Weapons grade plutonium anywhere. It's tightly controlled substances. I think it should be something like that, where we're aware that it exists, but it's tightly controlled, because we don't want crazy people who are filled with hate and are fanatically determined to kill other people, like terrorists. We don't want them getting advanced propulsion technology that can be perverted into a delivery system for a bomb or something, where you can send a bomb to someone's from one country to another in 2 seconds, right to someone's door. We don't want that. We certainly don't want that. So, but I think the energy tech could definitely be brought out and shared with everyone, because that alone would have a huge impact. And then the rest, again, as society begins to reshape, the rest could follow suit when it's appropriate. And then at some point amidst all that, we might actually be able to make peaceful contact with whoever's coming here, whoever or whatever is and has been coming here for God knows how long. We could become like a more enlightened race, a more peaceful race, and a more spiritual race, and that's rooted in peace and exploration and knowledge, and not tribalism and war and the acquisition of power. So anyway, none of that will happen, though, unless people, in my opinion, none of that will ever happen unless people on the inside defect. I think that is the only way. You'll never get anyone in there from the outside. It'll never happen. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your job is. Doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how smart you are. It makes no difference. You'll never get in. They will kill you before they let you anywhere near any of these places. But people who are already on the inside, who are trapped on the inside, if they have the courage to come out and ideally many of them, to come out all together, all at once. And that in my view, that is the only chance we have. That is the only way this is going to work. It's the only way we get ahead of the narrative, the false narrative of this evil alien BS narrative that they're trying to spin on everyone. That is, in my opinion, that is the only way we stop that from happening. So I hope that, in the future, hopefully the near future, I hope something like that happens. And I hope that there are brave souls I'm sure there are a lot of people who are involved in this, but they're all afraid. They're all I imagine a lot of them are scared. And they don't want to lose their families. They don't want to, they have a lot to lose, and they don't want, and it's not just them losing their lives. They don't want their kids and their families to lose their lives. So they're obviously very hesitant. So we need to protect these people. We need to give them the protection they need to make sure they can tell their story and they can get, their stuff out there. But, but that's going to be up to them to do it, and it's going to be up to us to make to protect them and make sure that they can bring all this information forward. So anyway, that's really my that's my opinion on all this. That's my assessment. Take it for whatever it's worth to you. But again, I've been studying this subject a long time. I've watched the patterns of behavior with corporate media, with people in society, in polite society, academia, all of it, Hollywood, and I've noticed a significant shift. But unfortunately, it's for the worse, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, well, where I just suddenly see this acceleration of trying to convince people. I suddenly see this conglomerate of legacy media suddenly, openly, and insistently telling everyone these things are a threat and we should be frightened of them. And they're bringing in operatives to try to reinforce that narrative. And then they every once in a while they put out another video, some blurry video or some like Homeland Security video or something of some little dot or something moving really fast and moving at high speed and whatever. And it's all part of the narrative. It's all part of the attempt to control the narrative, own it, and make sure that everyone enough people buy into it, especially our leaders, especially. And so that way, when the time comes, and eventually it will, if no one does anything, if no one actually does anything like to stop this, eventually there will be a time, not too long from now, where there will be another false flag incident that will be made to look like, and it will be extremely convincing that we're being attacked by someone or something from another world. And it will be so convincing, almost everyone will buy into it. Our leaders will buy into it. They'll go along with it. And then the next day you'll wake, and then that will be that version. That will be the dirty version of disclosure. That will be the dirty version of disclosure. The day after that, we all wake up into a world of with no freedoms, no constitution, just a complete military takeover and endless war. No freedom and just endless war. On the other hand, if we stop this narrative dead in its tracks now before it's too late, then we're looking at a future that could potentially be like we're looking at like a 1,000, 10,000 years of peace and prosperity, of like a whole new golden age, a whole new Renaissance period of advanced technology. Sort of like, I hate to use this as an example, but like the way that in that movie Thor, like when he goes to Asgard and how it's all like, like people can. I mean, I don't know about people walking around in robes and all that, but like how they have advanced technology, and it's just completely woven and integrated into their society. It's just like hovercrafts and being able to teleport from their world to Earth in like a few seconds, and all the crazy, all the magical stuff they can do. Like I'm not saying it'll be like that. I'm just saying, but we could move it in a direction similar to that, where we begin to, but more like, I would say more like Star Trek. It would be more like Star Trek, where they start to build. We end poverty and homelessness and hopelessness and cure diseases, and we can build technology that can not only take us to the moon and to other planets in the solar system very quickly, but to other star systems very, very quickly. We can get there in far less, in a very short period of time, versus having to go and travel in a linear fashion, where we take an entire human lifetime to get to Alpha Centauri and back. No, just to get there one way, that's an entire human lifespan right there. But with this, with the technology that we could get from these rogue groups that are hiding it, over time, eventually that can be, again, that can be trickled out, and eventually we could end up in a time period just like Star Trek, where we have ships that can not do, I wouldn't call it warp drive, but like we can have ships that can take us to place all over our solar system and to other star systems in a short period of time. And we can become this, not only an interplanetary, but an interstellar species, and join what I believe is sort of a cosmic community of other life forms. Take our place in that community, and begin to interact with them and learn from them. But that won't happen. If these people get their way, that will never happen, ever. And it will likely end in our extinction. So our own self-destruction and extinction. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you sitting through this first episode and listening to what I have to say. I appreciate your time and attention. If you'd like to hear more, I will be making more episodes later on a similar subject, and similar subjects. There are a bunch of topics in this video that I want to come back and touch on a little bit more in depth, but I'll be shooting those later. So you can look out for those. And yeah. Oh, and Happy New Year. It's 40 minutes past midnight. So it's officially 2025. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Good night.